30 years, 2.2 billion yuan, and 1 death sentence. A former Chinese official just became the center of what may be the most dramatic corruption case this country has seen in years. Not because of one bad decision, because of 3 decades of them. His name is Yang Youlin, and by the time this video ends, you'll understand exactly how a bureaucrat in Nanjing built and lost an empire built entirely on bribes. Start with this. Yang Youlin wasn't some low-level clerk stamping papers in a back office. He held senior positions inside Nanjing's economic development system, including roles tied directly to the city's economic and technological development zone, the kind of post that controls land, funding, and business approvals worth fortunes. That's the position of power. Now, here's what he did with it. From 1993 to 2023, 3 full decades, prosecutors say Yang used that power as a toll booth. Want a project approved? Pay him. Need land rezoned? Pay him. Looking for funding access or help pushing a business deal through the system? Pay him. The Changzhou Intermediate People's Court in Jiangsu province laid all of this out in the painstaking detail. And the number they landed on wasn't more than 2.21 billion yuan. In US dollars, that's somewhere between $324 and $325 million, funneled to one man, in exchange for using his office like a private business. Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't a one-time scandal, a single bad contract, or a moment of weakness. This was a system, built slowly, maintained carefully. Across 30 years and, based on court records, an entire career's worth of quiet, calculated corruption. And the court didn't just call it serious, they called it severe enough to warrant the harshest penalty available under Chinese law. Here's where the story gets even heavier, because Yang wasn't just convicted of taking bribes. The court stacked charge after charge on top of that. Embezzlement, 11 years and 6 months, plus a 1 million yuan fine. Offering bribes to others, 11 years, plus another 1 million yuan fine. Misappropriation of public funds, 5 years. Abuse of power, 4 years. Money laundering, 6 months, plus a 100,000 yuan fine. Individually, any one of those charges would end a career and put someone behind bars for the better part of a decade. Combined, they painted a picture of someone who didn't just accept money quietly. He actively used his position to move funds, launder proceeds, and extend the corruption outward to others. And when the court combined all of it, the final sentence went beyond prison entirely. Death. Deprivation of political rights for life. Total confiscation of assets. So how does a bureaucrat quietly pull in $300 million over 30 years without the whole thing collapsing sooner? According to the court, Yang used his official authority to grease the wheels on exactly the kind of deals that move real money in China's development economy: project contracting, business operations, land transfers, capital turnover, development approvals. In exchange, people paid him. And in some cases, Yang went a step further. He used his influence to personally arrange land and development deals that court records say caused serious losses to the state. That last detail matters. This wasn't just a man collecting envelopes on the side. He was actively shaping how land and development money moved through an entire region, often in ways that benefited himself and his network at the state's expense. Now, corruption cases in China aren't rare. But death sentences for corruption? Those are. Multiple outlets covering this case have called it one of the most dramatic corruption cases in recent memory. Not because corruption itself is unusual, but because of the scale, the 3-decade timeline, and the sheer number of charges stacked into a single case. Most corruption convictions result in lengthy prison terms. Getting to a death sentence typically requires prosecutors and courts to establish that the scale and impact crossed a threshold most cases never reach. Yang's case did. This case doesn't exist in isolation. It sits inside a much larger, ongoing campaign. According to Xinhua, in just the first half of 2026, 14,000 individuals were prosecuted for duty-related crimes across China. 14,000 in 6 months. That number tells you something important. This isn't a one-off crackdown or a symbolic gesture aimed at a single high-profile official. It's a sustained, active enforcement effort, and Yang Youlin's case is now one of its most severe examples. Whether you view China's anti-graft campaign as a genuine cleanup effort or as a tool with other political dimensions, the scale of enforcement here is not in question. 14,000 prosecutions in half a year is not a symbolic number. It's a system running at full capacity. Under Chinese law, death sentences, particularly ones tied to economic crimes rather than violent crimes, typically go through additional review processes before any sentence is finalized. Appeals, higher court review, and in some cases, suspended execution terms are all part of how these sentences can play out over time. We don't yet know exactly how Yang's case will move through that process. What we do know is that the court has made its position clear. This wasn't corruption on the margins. It was, in their words, severe enough to justify the harshest penalty on the books: 30 years, 2.2 billion yuan. A death sentence. Yang Youlin's case is now one of the most severe corruption convictions in recent Chinese history, and it's a window into just how deep and how long-running this kind of corruption can go before it's finally caught. If you want to stay ahead of stories like this, hit subscribe. We break down China's biggest headlines, clearly, quickly, and before most people are even talking about them.